Hey everyone, and welcome back to this month's episode of Precious Presents Performing Arts. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the Little News Ears YouTube channel and you follow the Little News Ears podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. But before we get started, here's some breaking news. Kwame Alexander's The Crossover is now streaming on Disney Plus. The novel, written in verse, was originally published almost a decade ago. The new series sticks to the original plotline. Also, Sandra Lim has been awarded the Jackson Poetry Prize and $85,000. And in April is National Poetry Month. What comes to mind when you hear poetry? Do the words dancing on a once desert-like page, brittle and thirsty until into the depths of your mind they jump and project images once at a time to form a story? Or is it a soft voice coating a microphone's edges to bounce around the entire room like a trampoline, refracting the message somehow to become a puzzle piece your mind never knew it needed? Documentations of poetry have been found since 2500 BC. However, performance poetry began in the 1920s with the jazz movement. 30 years later, the UK got involved. By the 1960s in America, spoken word was a source of expression for the civil rights movement. Around the 60s and 70s, spoken word heavily influenced rap, when hip hop was born in NYC. Even in 1960s, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech had many poetic elements, like rhyme, repetition, metaphors, personification, and he delivered it to a large group of people. So now let's talk to a real poet. Legacy Severe is a creative, captivating, life-changing poet. As Legacy brings her poems from the page to the stage, she leaves her audience wanting more of her positive and imaginative artistry. She is a firm believer that her ministry serves as an opportunity to express and share the unique talents God has bestowed upon her. In 2017, Legacy was honored to have her original poem, entitled Marriage, featured and published at the America Library of Poetry in Houghton, Maine. This inspired her to perfect her love for poetry. She's been the featured speaker in numerous venues within the Washington metropolitan area. Through poetry, Legacy feels a sense of connection with the soul and communicates it through rhyme and rhythm to tell a story. Her thought-provoking words impact, empower, and encourage audiences of all ages. She is a living legacy, transforming the minds for the sake of the gospel. Hey Legacy, how are you? Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, so all right, I want to get straight into these questions. We all know poetry is so many things. It can be hard to define sometimes, like just the one thing. But what would you say poetry is to you?
Poetry is deliverance for me. Um, Poetry is more than just words on a piece of paper. It's more than just words spoken to a crowd. It's really just deliverance. And some people look at poetry as just live performance and sometimes personal satisfaction. But what I look at poetry as an art that changes lives. And my art changes lives by advancing the kingdom of God. And that's the change I like to get. I like to make. Yes.
And I feel like I can already just see like you are so passionate. But what inspired you to get into poetry in the first place, and specifically spoken word?
Personal experiences. Um, I found myself one time in life constantly trying to disguise pain, hardships behind a smile, mask it all up, bottle up all my emotions. And I never expressed them, right? So I came to a point in my life where God was involved, and I felt like God was just telling me, it's time to express this. It's time to stop holding back. And once I expressed it, that's what inspired me. God telling me to do it, and also just that weight of everything pushing me down, all of the rejections and all of the hardships and pain I was going through. I didn't want to really go out, but I felt like God was there and was like, you know what? Okay, um, let's take this to another level. So once I started to express myself through poetry, I felt like God showed me that you are not the only one going through this. It's other people. Not I'm not saying other poets, but it's other people experiencing what you're experiencing. So yeah, that's what inspired me. Yeah.
You know, I love that you said that. And that kind of leads into the next question I was going to ask. So, this episode is all about how poetry can be the voice of a community and cultures throughout years and decades and stuff. So, I mean, you literally touched on it, but poetry can be something that's personal to you that you can express your own self through, but it can also
Mhm.
speak to and speak for other people. So, how have you seen poetry being a voice for communities and cultures through your life and through other like friends and experiences?
Mm. I've seen poetry be a voice for Women's Month. Oh my gosh, so many people spoke on celebrating women's achievements.
Yeah.
Black History Month,
Yes.
just celebrating our Black culture. I mean, it's just so many topics that you could speak on. Um, Especially open mic for the community. It provided a safe space for poets to come and really just express who they are, where they have been, and like where they're going. So it's very powerful to see how poetry is being a voice for so many different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, and especially because, like, for me, I got into poetry after reading, like reading poetry and books and stuff. I love stories, so
Mhm.
I had never read poetry in a story before. Before I read, I think it was the Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. So
Mhm.
what books would you recommend for other kids, specifically who are like second, through sixth grade, late elementary school to early middle school, who are interested in poetry but maybe just don't know where to start?
Okay. So I don't have any poetic books to recommend at the moment.
Hmm.
But what I do recommend is that you create a book of expression. Like that's how I started. So if I was feeling something, I would go get a notebook from the dollar store, a notebook from Target, whatever, and write down everything I was feeling. So, for example, if you go to school, right, and like, let's say something happened, or you go to church, something happened, come back home and like write in that journal, right? Because I feel like that's how God used me. You write down everything you have, you either experience sad, good, fun experiences, bad experiences, and that's how God used me to glorify Him through poetry. So you don't know how God is going to use you. And even if it's not in poetry, if you are into the arts, if you're into dance, I don't know, do it the best way you know how, So that would be I don't have a book, but I would say create your own book. I don't know. Like God can use you in any way. So, you know,
I
yeah.
love that. This is just a
Yeah.
side question. Like, do you have a favorite poet in general, like it for spoken word, like performances?
Hmm. I wouldn't say I have a favorite poet, but I do like a lot of different pieces from multiple poets, if that makes sense.
I know exactly.
So, yeah, yeah. So it's like where I find all of that poetic energy, good vibes, is really on Instagram. And even when you go to open mics, like you can meet a lot of different poets. I made so many connections. But on um what some Instagram platforms is Voices in Power. It's One Poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else? And so much more. If you just go to those two, you will
Right.
find so many other organizations, poetry organizations that post different artists that just express their poetry. So, and you can follow them through there too. So, yeah.
And I'm sure there's so many people wanting to follow you. So where can people follow you, keep up with you, read your stuff, or
Mhm. Yeah, of course. My Instagram handle is The Life of Legacy. My Facebook is Legacy Severe, and my TikTok is The Life of Legacy. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for being here, Legacy.
Thank you, Precious. Thank you so much.
Today, poetry inspires so much of our daily lives. Cats the Musical is an international musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber and was inspired by The Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot. Glory the Song by John Legend and Common from the 2014 movie Selma uses the lyrics to deliver a strong address to the people and for a movement. Anyone can write poetry, and there are plenty of competitions where you can submit or perform your work. I'll see you again next month with a new episode. May your sweetness shine and your colors glow.